Hi and welcome. In this chapter, we will talk about AWS Security Group. So, AWS Security Group acts as a virtual firewall that controls the traffic for one or more instance. So, the meaning of this is consider a VPC. So, we have a VPC here. So, maybe the VPC address space is d0.0.0/0, and you have a subnet 1 and subnet 2. So let's say you deployed a VM in subnet 1 as well as in the VM in subnet 2. So by default, any traffic which is reaching the VM, it should pass through something called a security group. So security group that you're going to attach to the virtual machine. So it is a virtual firewall on the VM level. So security group, it consisting of both inbound as well as outbound rules. So the meaning of inbound and outbound rules is nothing but you need to define what all the traffic which is a incoming traffic is allowed to this virtual machine. Similarly, what are the outbound traffic which is allowed from this virtual machine. By default, it allows all traffic which is allowed to go outside. However, no traffic is allowed to go to the virtual machine, so you cannot initiate any traffic into this virtual machine. It will get blocked by the security group. In security group, we need to mention both inbound and outbound rules. So the meaning of this is what are the traffic which is allowed to enter into this virtual machine over here, and what are the traffic which is allowed to go out of this virtual machine. So by default, you will have a security rule which is related to the inbound, which is nothing but a default rule. So the default rule which says that any traffic within the VPC or within the subnets which is allowed. For example, let's say if I wanted to communicate from this virtual machine to the this virtual machine or vice versa, this action is allowed. Why? Because we'll have a default entry in the security group. Similarly, the outbound rule. Outbound rule is nothing but the traffic which is going out of the virtual machine. For example, let's say you have internet here and you wanted to communicate to the internet, or you have on-premise network here, so you wanted to communicate to the on-prem. This is not allowed. When it comes to the outbound traffic, let's say if you wanted to communicate to the on-premise or if you wanted to communicate to the internet, so this is our internet for example, this is allowed. Why? Because we have a default rule saying that all traffic from the virtual machine should be allowed to go to the outside. So this is the default firewall rule which is available in the security group. So once again, the default rules are any traffic within the VPC or within the subnet should be allowed, which is the incoming traffic, and the outbound traffic, which is anything which is going out of the virtual machine, whether to the internet or to the on-premise, wherever it wants. So which is also allowed. This is because of the default rule. So on top of it, let's say if you wanted to take a remote of your virtual machine from the internet, then you should define the incoming rule separately saying that, so from my PC, let's say my PC IP address is 172.22 dot something something. This is the public IP address of my PC which is over here in the internet, and if you wanted to communicate to the virtual machine, I need to first add a rule to the inbound rule saying that from this VM I should allow 3389 port or all traffic to the this virtual machine. So I need to add this rule in the security group, then only I can able to access my VM from the internet. Similarly, if you wanted to communicate anything to the internet, for example, let's say if you wanted to communicate to Facebook or google.com from this particular virtual machine, so no rule is required. Why? Because I'll have a default rule saying that all outbound traffic is allowed. So this is the brief about security group. So in a nutshell, let's say if you deploy a virtual machine in Amazon, it comes with the default security group. So this will allow you to control incoming and outbound traffic to the virtual machine.